Good morning, everybody. This is Blackheart6. Here we go. We're going to do a new video. We're actually going to start a new video series on how to create a scenario with the scenario framework from the very beginning. And we'll go through every step of the process and we'll create a scenario. Bring in some different elements to it and show you how to do different things. And then we, of course, have all those videos on about Scenario Framework Wiki and the other playlists that you can use to help you create your scenario. The very first thing, of course, is you have to have Arma Reforger tools. So there are two flavors to Arma Reforger. There is Arma Reforger and then Arma Reforger Experimental. Experimental is the future version of Arma Reforger. It's currently at 1.5.0 point something, and it's will be the release. It's going to be the next 3.2. There we go. So it's going to be the next release of Arma Reforger. So, but it does take some different things to do to use it without corrupting your released version. Okay, this experimental version is called Submission, and this version is called Production. So when you look at the, we'll show you that in the versioning when you dealing with that. So the first thing is you have to have the game. Okay, we're going to work in the production version of the game. That way, everybody will have the same tools available because some of these items that are in the experimental is not available, obviously, in the regular production version. So we want to make sure we're using the production version for these videos. So you have Arma Reforger, and you have this software package called Arma Reforger Tools. Now, Tools is not in the game section, so if you're having trouble finding it, you have to look in Software and Tools to find it, and you should be able to find it inside Steam. Even if you cannot find it in Steam, there is another alternative method to finding software in Steam, and you go to steamdb.info. Okay, and then of course if you type in the search for Arma Reforger, you're going to find all these software packages for Arma Reforger. So you have the game itself, the experimental version, have something called Soundtrack, which is free, I believe. At least it's in my queue for some reason. You have the tools, and here's where you get your server as well. So you can get that. And then these are the deluxe editions, different versions of Arma Reforger. And then, of course, you get the experimental version here as well, and the experimental server. So if you want to set up an experimental server, you got to go through steamdb.info. All right, and to install from db.info, you go to the software package, click on it, and up here in the upper right, it'll say install. And when you hit install, it will say this is trying to open in Steam. You go ahead and open it, and it will install the program from there. I have it already installed, so I don't need to reinstall it. So let's go down to Tools. So we're going to launch it. Now, when you first install Arma Reforger Tools, it'll bring up this window, and you launch it. It's going to bring up this window called Enfusion Workbench Launcher. Okay, this is where you start all your projects, okay, and keep track of your projects. It's a very simplistic window. You have a little gear wheel over here that allows you to change the view mode, okay, and then you have a help up here. So if you click on the help, it will take you to the Wikipedia for mod project setup, and it will show you how to use this tool, okay, or utilize this window. In here, and then down in the lower left, we have what's called Add Project button. All right, and then here you can create a new project, add an existing project, or scan for projects. So if you want to look, you placed a project somewhere else and you need to find it, you can scan for it, and it will look for any of the add-on .gproj files and add it to this. And I'll show you how to do that when we get into adding mods to your project. Okay, so one thing that you have to do before you can create a new project, you must add a project to this, and the project is the game itself. So you go to add existing project, and as you can see, I've already driven over here, so it's already in my, but wherever your game resides in your Steam application, usually it's in Steam Apps Common, Arma Reforger Add-ons Data. Okay, you want to go to this tree right here, and let's go back. So it's when you drill down, you'll get to the add-ons folder, you'll get to the data folder, and what it is there's a file in there called Arma Reforger gproj. A gproj file is a game project file. You must add this to your project launcher or your Enfusion Workbench launcher before you can start creating anything in Enfusion Workbench. Okay. Think of the Workbench just like it sounds. Okay. So the Workbench, if you think of the Workbench as a physical workbench that you would do work at, you've got drawers, you've got maybe a pegboard back there, you've got tools, you've got all kinds of different things on your workbench. That's really how you can think about it. So we have this projects. This could be considered a drawer. We've put our projects into the drawer or an inbox or something to that effect. And now what we want to do is once we add that Arma Reforger, we can create a new project. So we go ahead and click on that, and it will bring up a new project panel. In there you can have the project name, and here is the location of where your projects are going to be stored at, and I would recommend that you leave this at default if you're just starting out. You can change this path by changing some settings in the software and using some parameters, startup parameters, but for the most part just keep it here. There's no reason to really change it. Now, when you do want to change this is if you get into using the experimental version of Workbench. If you're going to use the experimental version of Workbench, I highly recommend that you do not mix your experimental projects with your regular projects. Keep those things separate because we are talking about two different versions of software. As you can see, the dependencies here are all the scenarios that I've created, or projects that I have created, and they're being picked up by this software because it's looking in this folder. So, and as you can see at the very top, it says Arma Reforger, and it's checked, but it's grayed out. That's because it's the game and it's required as the software. Okay, so it's going to automatically add Arma Reforger to your project as a dependency because you have to have it, and that's the reason you have to have it in your project. It has to be a dependency. So we go ahead and we can name our project. So what we're going to call this project is Scenario Creation Tutorial. All right. So give it a name. I hit entered. You could select open. And what it will do is going to open up the Enfusion Workbench, and up in the very top of the title bar of the window, you can see Enfusion Workbench and Scenario Creation Tutorial. All right. Now, this software, if we go to Help and go to View Help, this software is officially called Resource Manager. Okay. So you have the Enfusion Workbench Resource Manager. That is this window here. And of course, if you go to the wiki, you can find out all the information about it. Okay, tons of information. One thing about Arma Reforger that they've done better is they've update the wiki, and they have the wiki in place before they release it. So that was a much improved item versus Arma 3, where you'd go to Arma 3 and look at a function, try to look up a function, and there'd be absolutely no information on it. This is done much better. They've gotten the wiki information out close or at the same time as they update and stuff. So much improved there. Kudos to them on that. The current version we are working in is going to be down here in the lower right. It's version 1.4.0.55, and this is where I was talking about production. So if you're an experimental, say, submission down here, that's what delineates between the two versions. And of course, the number will always be higher than the production version in the submission version. So that's where you find that information. You may need this information if you're troubleshooting something and you have to put in a feedback ticket. And so you need to know where you get that version. You can find it right down there. In this window here, so we have our resource browser. Right above that, of course, is the file menu. We're not going to go through all these. There's just too many of them, and you can learn about them by going to the help, and it will tell you what to do with them. Here we have another panel called Resource Browser, and here's where you can find everything that's inside the game. And these will always be locked. You won't be able to unlock them. Here's the core directory, logs, profiles, and then here's our folder for our project, and in it is the addon.gproj file, which was created when we created the project. Okay, so and then inside this big window here, this big panel, this is the view panel, I guess you could call it. Well, let's look, see what they're calling it. Number 2, the main window. Okay, so we have the resource and the main window. So we'll leave this up. So inside the main window, you have this quick launch bar. This will get you to all the sub-programs of the Enfusion Workbench. You will do 99.9% of your work in the world editor. These here are specialized editors that deal with specific subjects, but the world editor is basically your mission editor, if you want to think of it that way. Okay. You can also get to your editors by going up to the file bar and go to editor. So if you have something open in here and you need to get to an editor, you can do it through the editors in the file menu. Okay. Down in the links, of course, will take you to certain links within that are needed, modding documentation. So if you want to find something about modding, you can click on that link and it'll open it up right away in your browser. Now over here on the news, this is actually a pretty important window because 9 times out of 10 you're going to open your software and you won't even know there's been an update because it's not posted on the Discord or it's on the web page and you didn't know it. So always check here for an update. As you can see, on September 4th they updated the game to 0.55, and then you can get information about that update. And then also another important part of this is my Steam anyway, even though I've got the same settings on both software, my Steam always updates this software before the game. And then what happens is you go into the game or you go into the workbench and you're doing your work and you try to run the play mode on it, and it causes an error and it crashes the software. That's because you're running it 2 different versions. So always check, if you see there's been an update to the workbench, then check your game and make sure that you've updated the game as well, because if the 2 aren't at the same version, you'll get crashes. Which brings me on to the next topic, crashes. This is still in development, don't forget. The engine, Enfusion engine, is not complete yet. They are constantly changing things, and there is crashes, and it happens a lot. Not as much as what it used to happen, but it can happen. So if you're into a project and you're building something, save often. Okay, make sure you save that every time, every chance you get, every change you get, so you can have your work, because it will lock up on you at the most unopportune time, and you'll be like, oh man, I forgot to save, and you're going to lose all that work. It does have some autosave features in it, and it's much better at recovery of your project. So they definitely have improved that, because they know that the software does have issues and will crash a lot because it is still in development. Okay, it's not because something they're doing. It's in development. This is a new engine and it's not done yet. So just be aware of that. Make sure you save often. Down in the bottom, we have the log console. So logging is important. It helps you track issues. If you're having a problem, you need to go to your console log and check to see if there's any error messages. Now there's 3 levels of logging here. There's warnings, informational, and then there's errors. Okay, so if you the red X in the circle or the X in the red circle is show error messages only. As you can see, we don't have any errors right now. This used to be populated with maybe 200 errors when you first start the software, so they've done a really good job of whittling down those error messages and getting them out. The next one over is the warning message. So if we click on that, we're going to get all the warning messages, and they're in orange. All right. And then the next one is informational. So as you can see, that's in the white lettering. So with all 3 of these turned on, now if you hit the gear wheel, that gives you your options. Basically, the only thing you can do here is change your text size if you want to. And if you want to get to the log file, you don't know where it's stored at, go to the gear wheel, open the logs directory, and it will open up the Windows Explorer and show you where the log is at. Okay, and of course, then you can open it up from there. All right. The other thing you can do is you can filter out. So if you troubleshooting a problem and you're like, I don't know what's causing, or you're doing something, you could like filter out or filter on GUI. So if there's any messages regarding the GUI, you can check GUI, and it will then only display entries with the GUI, okay, or entity script. As you can see here, there's some script issues. These are warnings, they're not errors. So what I normally do, what I normally will do is I will only leave warnings or errors on. I turn off warnings and information because it's just too much information. I want to see errors that could be causing problems in my scenario. So I just leave that turned on. And you'll see this a little bit later. We'll get into some of that. Okay, so that's pretty much the Enfusion Workbench. Let's look at the time. We're in 17 minutes. Okay. So the next step in your process here, once you get opened up in the Enfusion Workbench, you want to go ahead and click on the World Editor. And this will open up a piece of software called World Editor. And as you can see up in the title bar again, it says World Editor Unnamed Empty World. Okay, so let's go over these different panels here. A lot of information being presented to you. You don't need to know it all. Let's go to View Help. So we go to the View Help, and of course we have all the different entries here. So let's see if they say anything about it. Viewport. They don't really have any screenshots in here of this, so we'll just go over the different features in here. On your top, of course, you have your file menu. You do different things up in here. We're not going to get into that until we actually start using things out of there, because those are going to be the most common items you're going to use. And then you have an icon bar down here that will give you access basically to what is up in here. So if there's an icon here, it's available in the file menu. The panel down here called Hierarchy. And then you have another panel here called Resource down in the middle. And then you have another panel on the right side called Object Properties. You will utilize all of these panels. And in the middle is called the Viewport. And this is where you can display the game or you're playing. And then across that is different tabs to change your perspective, your camera, shading, placement, and selection. Okay. One I use here is probably most is the camera. So in the hierarchy panel, you can see there's a little world here called Unnamed, and then there is a layer. This is a layer called, I call it a world layer. And the reason I call it a world layer is because when you start working with components out of the scenario framework, there is also a layer there. So you have to delineate between the two layers. So I call this a world layer, and this is a framework layer. And then there's a little generic entity down here, this is a generic world entity, okay, and it's empty right now. There's nothing here. So once you get to this point, what you want to do is you want to open a world that you want to build your scenario in. So, and we're going to stick with the default worlds. You, of course, can download a mod from the Workbench or from the workshop, sorry, from the workshop, and you can build you know, a scenario in that world. But for our purposes, because we're just starting out, we want to stay with the default vanilla stuff so you can learn about it. Okay, so you want to go up here into your icon bar and you see create a new world or load a world. We're going to load a world. You load your world, and in what it'll do, it'll bring up a panel that says load world, and then it'll have all the worlds. It's going to filter out everything else and have just worlds available. And those worlds are delineated by a .ent file. So here you can see we have Arland and Eden. These are the two main land masses or worlds for Arma Reforger at this point. There is another world coming, but it's not been released yet, and it's not in 1.5 either at this point. For our scenario, we're going to use Arland. It's the smallest of the two islands, so we're going to utilize that. In Arland, you can see that there's an empty Arland. An empty Arland is an Arland that has no buildings or roads on it. It's just the land mass. We want to use Arland because it's going to have the buildings and the roads and the trees, and you know, it's a finished, complete island. So you highlight Arland.ent and then you click OK. All right, here's our Arland right here. Now, in your software, you're going to probably have, let's see, let's revert this. It's going to look like this, okay? So that value is going to be set to 2000, and let's get to I'll show you how I got to that. So here's the island. You can see that there's this mist, it's like a mist or a fog around the island, and it limits your ability to see everything. Now this has gotten better, but if you zoom out, you know, you can see that you can't see everything. So one of the things you may want to change there is to expand that mist, and the way you do that is you go to your camera and you go to far plane and you increase that to 10,000. And you can see it pushes that mist back, and now you can see the whole island clearly. So that's just a little tip. All right. So as you can see in the hierarchy, we now have Arland and a world layer called default, and it's locked. And these are all the components that are in Arland. So if we move over here, this is the first item called Adder Hill. All right. It's a generic entity. It's a prefab called Arland Hill, and it's named Adder Hill. So this is it right here. And if you see, as I move my mouse around, it's highlighting all the rocks, trees, buildings. All right. You don't want that to be that selection, okay? Because what it's doing is it's highlighting everything here in the lock. You want to filter out and make it only the active layer. So here in your menu bar, you go over to this little hamburger menu. It's called Entity Select Filter. And notice that it looks the same as the layer. So what it does is it filters out everything, and only will, you can either have all layers, which is what it's selecting from, or you can select from active layer only, or you can select from inactive layers only. So we're going to select active layer only, okay? And it's going to look like a little A up there. And now it still highlights these things. You can see that that's because default is the active layer, and there's only one layer here right now, and it's called default. So it's still going to pick over these things, all right? So, but you want to get that set up before you get started. All right, The next step in this process, you got two choices here. You can create a subscene of this world, which will create a new world that will allow you to start adding your components to your project, okay? Or at this point, you can create some folders that will be required inside your scenario create tutorial. Either way, it doesn't matter, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to get our folder set up first before we go any farther. And what folders we need here, the first two folders that you have to have is going to be called Worlds and Missions. And if you go to your Arma Reforger directory, you will see that there is a folder called Missions with a capital M, and then there's one called Worlds with a lowercase w. I thought it was required to have an uppercase on this here, but apparently this is lowercase, so I'm assuming that must be fine. Okay, and so what we want to do is recreate these folders, directory structures inside our project. Now, very simply, all you have to do is go to your folder, right-click, and go New Folder. Okay, and you go Missions. Okay, now there's another way of creating this directory structure, and I'm going to show you that because the directory structure in your project should match the directory structure of the game. So if you're doing any customization, that same directory structure follows the game. And what you want to do to match that is you go to what folder you want, and you can right click on it and say transfer to scenario creation tutorial. Okay, and it will bring up a window. Now, all these files do not move. Okay, it looks like it does. It looks like it's going to move 117 files. Okay, they will not move. It's only going to recreate the directory structure, and the reason is because this is a locked mod. Okay, with the locks on there, it will not move the files. So you hit transfer, and as you can see in our folder, it populated Worlds. And it also populated all the other folders that are in the game file with that. So we don't need all of these, but we're going to utilize them. And we also jumped back over to Enfusion Workbench. You see that? So we changed windows. So if we go down to our worlds, now we don't need all these, but what we do need is we're going to keep the multiplayer. We're going to get rid of Arland. So what we want to leave is the multiplayer and the single player. Okay, we can get rid of these. Okay, and so that's going to be our directory structure for our worlds. Okay, and we'll get into why we're using these. All right, so we have our directory structure set up. Now the next thing you want to do is you want to create a subscene. So you click on the little document icon in the upper left below File, and you'll come up with this Create World. Now if we were creating a world from scratch and making a brand new terrain, we would use a base scene. But for our purposes in creating a scenario, you always want to select subscene, and it's going to create a subscene of the current world. So you do that, you hit OK, and then it'll do some work. And now you can see that Arland is grayed out, default, and we have a new icon up here of an unnamed world with a new default world layer. Okay, and now this is the active layer. You can see it's highlighted, so you can't make default active anymore. So now it's this layer is active, and now you cannot highlight all the buildings and stuff. Okay, So if we want to be able to highlight those buildings, we can go and change this to select from inactive layers only, and now we can highlight them. You see that? So that's the difference there. But you always want this, you always should leave this at active layers only so it doesn't select inactive items and cause problems when you start driving around. All right, so let's check time, 30 minutes. Yeah, we're very close. So let's, at this point, we can save our world and give it a name. We haven't added anything, but we can save it. So we're going to hit Save World, and inside our folders, we have multiplayer and single player folders. This is going to be a multiplayer scenario. It's not going to be a single player, so we're going to leave it at that. Go into the multiplayer folder, and then down in the file name, we want to give this some kind of name, so we can say, you know, anything you want. Scenario. Let's do this. Put the world name in here so we know, because you can have multiple worlds within this scenario. So scenario creation, Arland. Okay, good enough. And then what it'll do is it will save this world. As you can see, it changed the name here, and then it also added a .ent file in that folder, and then it also added the layers folder. And in that layer, in the underscore layers folder, there is now the default layer. So if we wanted to edit this default layer, let's say for whatever reason this file is accessible right here. It's a layer file, so you can actually double click on it and open it up, and it will open up in a editor of some kind. If you don't have a text editor, I have Visual Code, so it will automatically open up. And there's nothing present right now because it is empty. It's at 0 bytes. So let you just know that we'll show you a trick here later when we start adding components of how to make it easier to edit those components. Okay? So we're going to stop here. We have opened up our software. We've created a new scenario. We've added a subscene. We've created our directory structure. We're not finished there. There's still another folder, but we'll get to that. But we've created our 2 main folders that we need to continue on to the next phase. And then, of course, we save that world now into our world that we're going to start adding components to. Okay? Stay tuned. I'm going to get another, we'll move on to the next one. I want to try to keep these short, 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on what we're doing and where the good stopping point is. And that is right here at this point. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. Y'all have a great day.